In the last video, we drew the particle diagram for calcium phosphate. Here it is. We did not have time to write the formula for calcium phosphate. We started to write it, but this is not the correct formula because it doesn't tell how many atoms or polyatomic ions are in there. It tells us that there's calcium and it tells us that there's phosphate, but it just isn't done. All right, so I'm going to finish that. First of all, I've got to make I've got to make it a subscript. So I'm going to write control, comma, make it a subscript. There we go. And then I'm going to bigger this. So write control, comma again. All right, so there's calcium phosphate. Now I need to tell people that there are the correct amounts of these. So calcium, how many calciums are in that compound? Well, 1, 2, 3 calciums were drawn in there, each with a +2 charge. I don't have to write the charge in this compound, but I do have to write that there's 3 of them. So there's the 3, and I'm going to make it small, all right? And then phosphate, there are 2 phosphates in there. Now, how am I going to tell them that there's 2 phosphates? You have to remember that this phosphate is something that's acting like one atom, all right? It's all stuck together. Those do not come apart. That phosphate does not come apart. So we have to make that very clear when we write the name here, that it does not come apart. So I'm going to write a parentheses around it. So I'm going to write a parentheses. Oops, I'm going to delete that parentheses. I'm going to bigger my cursor, and then I'm going to write a parentheses around the phosphate. All right, now that's telling people that it is a polyatomic ion. And so that's good, but it's not telling them that it's 2 polyatomic ions. So I have to tell them that it's 2 polyatomic ions. So I'm going to tell them that there's 2 of them. And then I'm going to make that too small. So just like every subscript, so control, comma, and there it is, and control comma again in case I want that large. All right, now what is this formula telling us? It's telling us that there are 3 calciums, and it's telling us that there are 2 phosphates. In every phosphate, there happen to be 4 oxygens, and there happens to be 1 phosphorus, okay? But there are 2 phosphates, and they stick together like this in one lump or one particle, and they don't break apart. All right, so these phosphates can go off someplace else, and they could react with some other positive element also, but for right now, they're stuck together, stuck with phosphorus. All right, so let me just review this so you know how to write these compounds. First of all, calcium phosphate. How did I come up and write that formula? Well, first of all, I had to know that phosphate, there's its formula. You got to learn those from this chart that I gave you or this list that I gave you. Secondly, you needed to know that calcium has a +2 charge. How do you know that? Well, you should know that over here on the periodic chart, calcium is in group 2, and so it has a +2 charge. So you know that. All right, and then you have to draw them until you have enough of each so that the charge equals out and overall they're neutral. So we wrote here on this drawing, we wrote a phosphate. We drew the P, the phosphorus, and we drew 4 oxygens stuck to it, but it's all in one lump with a 3- charge. Then we added some calciums to it. And we ended up with a 4 positive charge and then the 3 negative charge. So we needed more negatives, and we added another phosphate to make some more negatives. And then we needed some more calciums to equal those out. And once we ended up with 6 positives and 6 negatives, then we were done. All right. And so we wrote our calcium phosphate. Then we went down here to write the formula. We know that there's 3 calciums. We know that there's 2 phosphates. And we draw them like this with a parentheses around the phosphate so people know that that is a polyatomic ion, and it always comes in a group like that, okay? So you are going to be doing something like this. I'm going to give you one example before you actually have to do your assignment today.